there are certain things you do on the weekend, exercises and things that at first, as a man, you're not used to, because as a man, we're not used to relating in vulnerable ways to each other.
I'm raising my hand. First time, a lot of first times on that weekend.
Yes. But in doing it, you don't realize the role that other men play in your life, that how God uses them to communicate to you his love to you.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Good morning. I'm here with Mr. Mike Hatch. Say good morning to all the good folks.
Good morning, guys. It's good to be together with you, Jay.
Good to be together with you. And I have to say, I loved your energy coming in here. I myself am Dragon, and you're just a burst of life and a big smile.
Good.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for being here and willing to talk about your weekend experience. So we'll jump right in, unless I want to give you the opportunity as we're going in here, saying that things were helpful, and you like being helpful and being able to share things. To talk a little bit about the beginning. How did you hear about the weekend? What's the pre-weekend Mike's life kind of look like right before going in?
Yeah, that's great. So I first of all, I'm a recovering pornography addict. And so I want to throw that out there because I was involved in recovery prior to the Crucible Weekend.
Okay.
Very involved in the Celebrate Recovery program.
Yep.
And so I had some experience working through some emotions and struggles and talking about family of origin issues and things like that. But a friend of mine at a church we were attending at the time had gone through the Crucible Project himself and talked about just the profound life change he experienced. Wow. And it really piqued my curiosity. But there was also a part of me that thought, yeah, but I've done my own work. That's probably not for me initially.
And so, let me ask at this point, how far into Celebrate Recovery, like time-wise, weeks, months, years?
Years. I would say 2 or 3 years into working with Celebrate Recovery. I'd been through the steps at that point almost twice, maybe through. So that was my experience with that. But I was very, his story was very compelling to me. And so it stayed in the back of my mind. And until I was currently on staff with Young Life, which is an outreach ministry to high school kids in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. But eventually I left Young Life staff to move back to Pittsburgh, where we're from, to take on a pastor position there. I was going to become their men's pastor there. Cool. And in that transition, leading up to that transition, the, I guess, weight of that expectation of what I was going to take on, the new responsibility, the new role that I really felt ill-equipped for, began to dredge up some insecurities in me and make me question a little bit what, maybe feeling a little bit of, what's the word? The imposter syndrome, some of that. Yep. And really feeling, just inadequate. And so, and then of course, with that comes the ever-present issue of pornography and lust that had its grip on me for so long. And there were, even though, I've, to some extent, I've gained freedom over the time, as I've walked in the light, if you will, and been in recovery, also been more honest with my wife, that sin has loosened its grip on me. But in times like that transition I was going to make professionally, I think it led me to realize how vulnerable I still was. Yeah. And going into this new role, that I really need to shore up or renew that work in a sense, because I needed a new experience to kind of unlock some new new rooms in my heart, maybe, that I wasn't allowing God access.
So it really does sound like you're sensing the hey, I'm stepping into a new ministry here, and I'm feeling all these things come up, and I can really honor the, like, I need some other things here. I need to figure out some things, and I need to get God on board here more than where I'm at right now. And this reminds me, and this might be about me, might not be about you. As I have looked at my own pornography, like every man has looked at pornography and what it's doing in my life and how it's working. This actually came through a 12-stepper who was not in pornography, were in alcohol, and they said this just nailed me. They said the addiction is not the problem, it's the solution to a problem. And so it became, when things would come up, when things would get hard, when I would get scared, like, oh, here's my solution. Now it's also problematic, like, I'm not saying, but
definitely right.
But in helping me to unpack that and helping me to find ways to work on that, it was definitely, things would come up and be like, oh, here's my solution. To escape into something and get chemically high.
That's exactly
in my head,
or escape the issues. I mean, that is what a high is about. It's about escape from reality, really. And so, and that was, by the way, so just to kind of give you a bit of a timeline, it was when I actually experienced the Crucible Weekend, it was probably somewhere between 3 and 5 years after I originally heard about it from my friend.
Interesting.
So I knew, again, it was in the back of my mind. I knew it was something that intrigued me. Didn't feel like I needed it in that moment, but then the weightiness and the significance of this new transition brought it back to light. And I went online, I remembered it, searched for it, and said, maybe this is something I needed to try.
Yeah. Well, and that, I mean, might be my story, but that sounds like God showing up also. The seed is planted, and then, hey, I'll meet you on this mountain if you're willing to come up here and join me. So, but your friend never kind of kept inviting you, kept on you, kept re-inviting you. That's something I've noticed that is helpful when I'm inviting
that's a good question. He did at first, and then I think he backed off, probably thinking that he needed to give me space, which I appreciate. And then when it came back in my mind, though, there's something I needed to check out, I reached back out to him, and we had a good conversation about it.
Yeah. So cool.
Mm-hmm.
So and again, this is my story. It sounds like the tide's moving in and out. Things are churning and things are coming up. And you sign up for the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your first impression, like, going into the weekend? Mm-hmm. And we kind of talk about the time of day. So if you've gone to a weekend, you'll know kind of what's going on at that time. Is the weekend start on a Friday night? Was Friday night really impactful for you, or was it into Saturday, or what came up for you?
Yeah, Friday night, I had some idea that it would be an intense experience based on what my friend said. Mm-hmm. And I was not disappointed right off the bat. Right off the bat, showing up, it was intense. And again, won't get into the details of it, because every guy, I really believe that if you're listening to this and you're thinking about the Crucible Project, just know that the less you know going in, the better, because we as men we want to be in control of everything, and I think it's really good to let go and just trust God with the experience. And of course, the surprises that come along the way will be all the more impactful if you go in, not knowing that. Right.
Yep.
So
I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. So it was a jolt. It was definitely a jolt initially, because I didn't know what to expect. And the way I'll say it is you're confronted directly, not even necessarily someone in your face, but it just in sometimes maybe, but just in the way they ask you to address the issue and begin to wrestle with God over the weekend. It is, and then the way you see others share from their experiences. It really, what I loved about it was it pulled the blanket off, in a sense, what I might've been hiding at that point, but in a good way. I don't mean that in a way where I was like, oh, I'm so ashamed, I need to cover back up. It's that it was actually relieving, to see. And as I watched all of us as a community of men begin to reveal the issues in our hearts and our struggles, it gave me courage to do the same.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I remember sitting there. I still remember the man who was leading the different parts of that weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, like, if that man can go there, then I can too.
Yes.
And finding other strength in going through that weekend through the men. And so I was wondering, as you're feeling this jolt, as you know, there's some amount of confrontation, but also, peeling back the blanket.
Right.
What is your reaction? Is it to power up? I'm going to do this. Is it like, I'd rather be somewhere else? Do you even remember?
Oh man, I was scared. I was so scared.
Yeah,
if I'm just honest, I saw it and I wanted it. I wanted that transparency and vulnerability, but it's still a step of faith, like it really got to a point in my own heart and spirit where I had to kind of check my faith. Do I really believe God is good? Do I really trust him enough to step out and embrace this experience and engage with it?
Wow. Yeah.
But then as I think there's a friend of mine actually who says this. He took on a particularly hard calling in his life, and his message is do it afraid. And that is how I did it. I was probably my knees knocking, shaking, just decided to put it out there, trust God. And man, did he meet me in that. In a big way.
It is my experience over and over, hearing people say the big truth and get big grace. And if you give the little truth in your life, you'll get little grace. And so hearing, sounds like your friend said, it was so impactful. That has to do with, being willing to go all the way when you're on that weekend.
Yep. And let me real quick with regard to that, I think prior to, I think different things in our lives give us opportunities, I think, to unveil new levels of vulnerability and authenticity. And Celebrate Recovery did that for me. I think it started out with SA, Sexaholics Anonymous, which only took me so far because it wasn't Christ-centered. But then Celebrate Recovery really opened up a whole new chasm of things that brought stuff out. But then there's a certain point where I don't know if it's just that maybe it's that I got, how do I say that? I guess I got to a certain point where I felt like I could share as much as I could maybe with the guys I was with.
Even in doing Crucible work, I'm finding layers of an onion, right? Like, here's the next layer.
And so the Crucible Project helped, I think, to get me to that next level of authenticity, if you will. That the Celebrate Recovery had helped me get to a certain point, and then the Crucible, that experience. And my guess is, so I've done the Crucible once. So my guess is that people, and I've heard this from friends who've been involved in Crucible, whether it be as a participant or part of the leader team, the staff, right?
Guys. Yep.
But even that, like, I think it's the thing that wakes you up a little bit, or at least it did for me, is that it's a process, and you're never obviously done, but that these new experiences, every chance you get, help to reveal more about yourself. But by virtue of that, you're convinced more and more, and you're exposed to the goodness of God in ever increasing amounts.
I absolutely have found that staffing has been as or more impactful than going through the weekend. I can, say, like, I was so impacted by the man standing up there leading some of parts of the weekend. And now I'm invited to be that man. And so you can imagine, the new levels of needing to rely on God, needing grace, for that thing for those, for those experiences to work for everybody. I mean, Elvis is in the building, right? The Holy Spirit shows up, and that's how the whole weekend works.
That's right.
for everybody, for the staff and the participants. So yeah, feeling the jolting, and going into a leap of faith. It sounds like, is God really good? Am I really going to go here? And so on the weekend, you make that leap, and is it a big question, or do you definitely land and be like, wow, God is good? What's your experience kind of later on in that weekend?
Oh yeah, it was without a doubt that God is good. And to me, what I love about the weekend is you're asked to, and again, without giving too much away, you're asked to identify and describe in a really cool way, I think, what that struggle is for you. What is that addiction, that hang up, that habit? What is it that's holding you back, basically? And that was eye-opening to me, to dwell on that, to meditate on that, and then verbalize a description of what that thing was that was really hindering me,
Yeah.
But then that also leads to your freedom in a sense too, because for me, at least, understanding the reality of the issue in that descriptive way just help me to understand at a new level the where the roots were that it had in my heart, where they needed to be pulled out, or
to get to that. So towards the end, what was the new experience? How were you experiencing that God was really good in the weekend, as you're going through kind of the arc of the whole weekend experience?
What I think for me, the biggest piece was that it was an affirmation of my relationship with God, but as He is my Father. And specifically, I've had a difficult, challenging relationship with my dad, which has contributed to my issues growing up. And but it was through the other men, through the staff there, through the way they communicated their own stories, both staff and other people who were there. It just, God really healed my heart in some ways, as it related to being able to relate to Him as a father in a vulnerable way. There are certain things you do on the weekend, exercises and things that at first, as a man, you're not used to, because as a man, we're not used to relating in vulnerable ways to each other.
I'm raising my hand. First time, a lot of first times on that weekend.
Yes. But in doing it, you don't realize the role that other men play in your life, that how God uses them to communicate to you his love to you, and I was able to internalize and accept that in ways I had never done before.
Yeah. Sounds like a letting in.
Yes, that's a great way of saying it.
Oh man, yeah, that resonates with me, and so I wonder if you're willing to rewind and go back in a story, and as they say on the weekend, a time when Mike was young, and there's still young Mike in there.
Definitely.
That there was this letting in on the weekend. So at some point, young Mike was like, you know what, I can't let this in anymore. This is too painful. I won't be able to keep going through life like this. And it was a good, my story is, it was a good thing for Mike to be able to do that, because Mike might not have made it if he hadn't found a way to put that up. So can you think of a time or a story in your life, something like that happened?
A letting in, you're asking?
And so when young Mike was like putting up the, like, you know what, I'm not going to let this in.
Got it. Okay.
And I'm young, and then, you continue going on, and then, you get older and you have your own kids and you're married, but there's still this thing here. Young Mike decided to put that there. So what can you think of a time or a story where young Mike was like, you know what, I got to do this, and it was really good for young Mike to do that?
So first of all, let me start with when so I grew up with a sense of shame in my life, deep shame of not feeling like I could measure up, not feeling like I could measure up to my own expectations or the perceived expectations of others, especially the other men in my family. I grew up in a family with some really big male personalities. My dad was a very popular radio talk show host, Christian radio talk show host here in Pittsburgh. My grandfather was a vice president of a huge coal mining industry, coal company. My grandfather was this executive vice president of Mobil Oil, in charge of the Asian quarter of the globe. Wow. So these are big male personalities. They walk into a room, they take over. You know what I mean? They take over, and I never felt like I could measure up. You know, high standards to live up to. And there are different times in my life where that shame was really poignant. Like, for example, when I was in second grade, and I part of the shame piece for me was procrastination. I was very afraid to get things wrong and not do it up to a certain standard. And so I would put things off. And one of those things, just real simple example, was homework. In second grade, I remember taking the homework papers, and I'd do what I could in school, and then I'd hide it away in my desk, and I would never turn them in. And it went on for weeks. And so I had this pile of homework papers that were undone in my desk, and my teacher finally had enough of it. And she thought, and this was her attempt at, I think, I guess trying to help me, to be helpful. Yeah. Right. In front of the whole class, she picked my desk up and dumped out all the papers on the floor. So there's this pile of homework papers, all my shame just laying there, everything that I had been avoiding, hiding, just in front of the whole class. And she reamed me out about it and said, and then I had to take them all home and do them. My parents were not happy and everything. Yeah. And so that communicated to me, don't be vulnerable. Like, if do a better job hiding than you did, or else you're going to pay for it.
Better job hiding. Wow. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. Yeah. So then when it comes to pornography and things like that, I did everything I could to cover it up, not to allow my shame to be poured out like that.
Yeah.
So that, just from the negative side of things, that was that situation.
And that makes a lot of sense. And as I'm hearing the homework papers are hidden, and one of the thoughts that comes in my mind is like, well, where are the parents? Are they? Where's your homework? How's it going? What's going on?
That's great point.
Yeah, that part too. And then the wow, it's really painful to show up around other people. There's a lot of shame. I'm embarrassed in front of everybody. And it's so interesting that, that's a microcosm right there. I'm sure there are many stories.
Yeah.
With family, with peers.
But then you also asked me about a positive side.
So the side of you get into the weekend, right? And little Mike has carried the shield, and part of that shield's up. You're already working on it. 12 steps, celebrate recovery. But in the weekend, then the positive side, what does that end up kind of looking like? It sounded like part of it was feeling God's love from other men because you were able to let it in.
Yeah. And so as a result of my experience growing up, I felt like I was on my own. I felt like I had to do it myself. I couldn't depend on others. Others weren't able to meet my needs or weren't willing to meet my needs. So it was up to me.
Yep.
One of the most powerful lessons I learned on the weekend was that these men were not only willing, but were happy to, excited to embrace the opportunity to meet my need, my deep emotional need.
Wow.
And man, was that profound. And it changed the way I viewed, again, so God is who communicated that to me ultimately through these men. Mm-hmm. And that was huge for me. And it also, it's something I have to be conscientious of today, because I still have to watch my motives, because I have this weird thing where I will want to help you, but my twisted motives inside, if I'm not careful, will be so that you will meet my needs.
Oh,
so it's
unspoken.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. There's some self-centeredness there to it if I'm not careful.
Yeah.
But that was a situation where the weekend where I basically just experienced having my needs met. And it helped to give me more confidence knowing that God actually wanted to meet my needs, and others
confidence.
Yeah, exactly. And confidence in him to be able to do that, as opposed to feeling like I'm on my own.
Yeah. And let me ask, I'm guessing that in this profound moment of feeling your needs met and love, that's very emotional. There's a lot of tears.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. There's a lot of crying that happened on the weekend, which I know, as I say that, I'm guessing there are men out there who are kind of cringing a little bit, thinking like, oh, I don't know if I want to be in a cry fest with other men.
Yep.
You would be blown away. It was some of the most manly experience I've had in my life with other men, to cry with them and affirm each other.
Yeah.
We're just not used to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just thinking as you checked in, I have sadness and I'm happy at the same time. Right. And that I think is the microcosm of a lot of what can happen. There are a lot of things going on at the same time. To not be one place or another.
And I'm sorry, real quick, as you said, I just wanted, this was the other piece was what was so helpful to kind of trace the breadcrumbs back to the root of the issues in my heart was how you do an amazing job on the weekend helping guys understand their feelings and connecting those feelings with physical manifestations. Yes.
Yeah. Manifestations. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that was one of the first places I remember hearing the connection between sadness and being choked up. You know, if you feel a tightening in your throat, for example, that could be sadness is what that is. It's your body telling you you're sad. Man, that stuff, like that was so helpful. That stuff that I still use to this day when I'm trying to think about, okay, how am I feeling? What are the physical things happening that can tell me what I'm feeling?
And that's one of the reasons I really like to do a check-in before doing anything. Because if I stop and I'm like, what do I feel in my back? What do I feel in my neck? What do I feel in my chest? Like, what do I feel in my body? And it's my body desperately trying to say, hey, you have some emotions that, you know, I'm squashing down or hyper intellectualizing or whatever the particular strategy is to not feel the emotion. It's there. Yeah, it's there. That's and right. It's so amazing. It is so amazing when that gets unlocked.
Yes.
So one of the things that I'm just putting together here as I'm thinking about you coming out is this ability to experience God's love through other men as you were going to be the men's minister.
That's a good connection.
Seem like God's timing, right?
It definitely was.
So yeah, tell me as you come out of this weekend and then move back on your life and that transition. Yeah, what was that like? What was up?
That's a great, it's so funny like that. I probably knew that at some point, but you saying that really even made it more profound in my mind, being aware of that. But you're right. It definitely helped me to be present with other men to I know it sounds crazy, but to like have eye contact and actually listen and repeat back, what they're saying and affirm what they're feeling or maybe identify or point out maybe what they're feeling and helping them with that. Oh my gosh, man. It was, and being a safe place for them.
Yeah.
Right. I found my safe place in the Father and the weekend was huge in that. So that's exactly right. God enabled me then to be that safe place through that experience for other men that I ministered to as a men's pastor. That profoundly true for me.
Yeah. And I was just hearing a deep awareness that you had of wanting to help other people. And there can be some twisting to that. Yes. And so I do want to point out that these weekends are not about like, I went and got fixed and everything was awesome.
That's right.
That's not been my experience anyways.
No, sometimes it's just to make you aware of it.
Yeah.
And kind of launch you into a process of how do I say, I guess, working on it or learning to give it over to the Lord.
Yeah. The journey continues. That is definitely something, if we talk about layers of the onion, I work on this until all of a sudden I hit some new thing and I'm like, wow, okay, there is no end to my journey. With God and my journey to, my true self. I'm getting off track here, but I'm interested in other parts of your life. So experiences with your wife, with your family, with other relationships. Yeah. What's that like coming out of the weekend?
Ooh, yeah, that's a great question. So, well, first of all, what was really fun was you have this amazing connection now with other guys who've been initiated or been through the weekend, themselves. It is, there's just a whole different level of, like we've said before, authenticity and vulnerability and connection, which makes you, again, in my role as a men's pastor, makes me kind of hope that in my role that I'd be able to promote that more for other men, that they would be able to have that experience as well. But so my relationship with my wife, the big thing with that was that suddenly, actually, because it's funny, because from her perspective, I leave for a weekend and then come back, and then suddenly I'm not completely changed, but I'm approaching things differently, where the biggest thing was, number one, the tenderness of my heart toward my wife. That was huge. And even just the ability to verbalize that to her, honey, I am tender toward you. That, oh my goodness, did that open up all sorts of new ways of connecting together, And then again, being able to reach inside my heart and pull out and explain those emotions and things that I'm feeling. It just, it was tremendous in helping to our communication, basically.
Yeah. It sounds like, in order to tell someone, to express what you're feeling, that's important. But then to open yourself up to being vulnerable, to coming out into a men's ministry, and is this the same ministry you're at now, or has that shifted since your weekend?
Yeah, it has shifted. So I was a pastor at the church for about 7.5 years, and I just recently transitioned from that to being on staff with CLC, and we can talk about that here in a little bit. But it's a men's ministry out of Nashville, Tennessee, and my role is the national relationships generator now, where I get to build relationships with pastors and churches and organizations all over the country. I get to help to expand current markets where CLC is, and then penetrate some new markets as well. And so the way I describe it is that I get to help busy pastors multiply their impact by empowering the men in their church through relational discipleship. And so we as a ministry have 4 lines of curriculum that help to facilitate that relational discipleship. So we say this often, we don't sell curriculum. It's not about curriculum, just like the Crucible Project, right? It's about relationships. It's about the experience, and the curriculum that we create is uniquely positioned to help facilitate that the relationships between men on a long-term basis, and discipleship in that process. Yeah. So that's what I get to do now.
So CLC, Christ-led communities.
Christ-led communities is whatever. Yep.
And we'll have this on the show notes as well, but clchq.org, if you're listening to this in front of a computer, want to jump on and look at it. So educate me a little bit more, if you would. So if I'm not a pastor, is there anything in CLC for me? Yeah. If I'm just, a Joe Blow on the street.
Yeah, definitely.
Like? Yeah.
So first of all, I recommend anyone definitely go to the website and check it out. It even has kind of an explanation of all the different curriculum that we offer. And so the first thing I would say is, if you're a pastor or not, if you're wanting to gather men together, a group of men together to grow in your faith, and to play a role in discipling each other, and or maybe you specifically bringing another man who's maybe young in his faith and you want to be able to disciple them, that is where this is an amazing tool. So for that guy who might be interested in facilitating a group like that, and the curriculum is, again, it's written in such a way where, for example, at the beginning of all 4 of the curriculum, the guys work through a worksheet that helps them communicate what we call their fence post story. And a fence post story, if you think about a fence along a property, each vertical post represents a significant moment in a man's life. So I shared one of my fence posts with the situation with the teacher and my desk being dumped out, for example. Most men, like we've just talked about, do not have a forum to be able to share those stories that about their lives,
much less even process it for themselves, right? Internally or externally. Yeah, I'm with you there.
Exactly. So often, and what's interesting about CLC is I love it. You start the group by sharing those stories. So what I love about it is it's just a baby. It's like the woman at the well, where Jesus is talking to the woman at the well, and he kind of coaxes the truth out of her a little bit, and then he at some point says, identifies it more clearly to her. But she just takes this baby, I mean, as small a dip of the toe in the water as possibly can be, when she says, or well, he says, I know you've had many husbands, and the one you're living with is not your husband. And but that all was prompted by her just saying, I don't have a husband. And that was that one dip of the toe, if you will, into the light in some way. Even actually, in some ways, theologians have seen that as being somewhat manipulative, even in a sense. So her motives may not have even been true in sharing what she shared that.
Interesting. Yep. I track
that.
But
Jesus still used it to bring more, shed more light on her situation. And so men share their story, and it's many of them, their first experience being able to communicate those significant moments in their life that led them. And what I've noticed in my own experience with these groups is they will take longer than I expect. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
They start out, a little scared, but then as they see other guys take interest and want to hear their story, I usually budget a half hour, but often it goes 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
Anyway, but what I love about, and then there's another piece to it where as you go through the curriculum, where you have an affirmation experience where each guy gets to affirm one of the men in the group, so, and most men, oh my gosh, they lack relationships, we're isolated. So to have a group of guys that you build relationships with, begin to count on, get to know deeply, and then have them speak life into your heart. Oh, it's profound. It really impacts them. But, and I say all that because that is what I love very much about, I've been, as a men's pastor, I've known a lot of different curriculum for discipleship. And there's great curriculum out there, but the unique thing that CLC does is, again, it facilitates that relationships through some of those tools I just mentioned, for example, so that you're not just there studying the Bible and studying the curriculum apart from getting in touch with yourself and getting to know others. It's kind of brought together in a beautiful way.
Yeah. And my story is that, like you said, I felt God's love through those other men.
Yeah.
Right. That it's baked in. It seems like it has to be, that those relationships along with the journey through the faith, that has to be baked in. So that's super cool. So then as you keep going.
Yeah. So then if someone were interested, for example, wanting to find out more, you could, obviously you can email us. I could meet with you to talk about, that's part of my role, is anybody around the country who'd be interested in starting a group. I'd love to talk to them, or they can shoot me an email. It's just mhatch@clchq.org. And if you're we have area directors all over the country, about 12 or 14 area directors. And if you're in an area with an area director, first of all, that's easy. I just get to hand you off to that area director, and they actually help to train you and to help you get a group started, basically. And that's the beautiful thing about working with churches. We, in some ways, CLC becomes like an unpaid staff to churches in their effort to disciple men. So that's a really cool aspect of it. And I've experienced that myself as a guy who was a pastor, and CLC was in our church as well. I knew that I had an advocate in the area director locally who was helping me and communicating some of the same things to challenge the men in their growth and discipleship. That was very helpful. And he wasn't on staff. He wasn't a paid mentor, but he was a partner. He was a partner. That's for sure.
So my own view, a lot of times, pastors are at the very top and kind of blowing around in the wind a lot of times. And so to have anyone come along to support, I'm always a huge I'm always a huge fan of getting support to the pastors. And for the Crucible Project, there have been some of the pastors that I've seen come through, and of course they're wounded people, right? And I think you said it well, like you're carrying a heavy load, and you sensed it as you're going into that men's ministry. To have anyone be able to come alongside, maybe they're the chief and they have a bunch of the Indians around them. The chief needs some other chiefs alongside him to help, as my story. Super cool. So as we get near the end of our time here, anything else you want to say about CLC?
Over 80% of churches do not have any intentional discipleship process for men. It's astounding, but it's true. Women, it tends to be easier. It just because they're so they externally process. They're like created to externally process. Men are not. But women connect so easily. They just talk about some social thing, a tea, something. And as I'm researching and getting to know pastors and churches around the country, I'm seeing this it's crazy. I'm seeing what I've heard all along. I'm seeing it in action, where I'm seeing churches and I'm on their websites and talking to pastors and them saying to me, we don't have anything for men, and getting men to be active in the church or just do anything can be really, really hard. And so I would say that CLC, I heard someone say that CLC can be the antidote to the programs in your church. So we've had enough of programs, if that makes any sense, in churches. And I've heard pastors say, more and more pastors, I'm hearing them say, we're about relationships, not programs. And if you have been on that trend as a church where you've kind of like been working programs, trying to get people in, things like that, CLC can really, I think, play a role in helping you drill down into a more relational approach to discipleship versus just programs. And so I'd encourage anybody who's interested, ministry leader, if you're just a man in your church who wants to get guys together and start a group, I'd love to talk to you about that. Real quick, the 4 curriculum, there's what we call Getting Real, which is a 9-month basically curriculum. It's our shortest program, probably the easiest, most accessible, most affordable. It's $50. This amazing devotional and a workbook that comes along with it. And you get together with the guys weekly for 3 12-week sessions, basically. And then and it's really kind of a primer, especially for guys who are not used to getting into relationship with other guys. This is an easier foot in the door with guys to get them started on something like this. We then have something called Next Steps, which is a deeper 1-year study with some extra biblical materials as well, some Christian books that you end up getting into, as well as some, and all of our programs or curriculum, let's call it curriculum, not programs. All of them have scripture memory involved in them as well. So you're in scripture heavily, memorizing it, accountable to other guys for that. But the Next Steps program or curriculum is for really for delving in deeper into your own identity in Christ. Think about an in-depth study of like Romans 8 through 10 or 11. The other program is Elbow to Elbow, which is specifically for young adults, and it's made for groups of 3 to 5. Same elements with the fence post stories, affirmations, scripture memory, things like that, but dealing more specifically with issues that young adults would be faced with or are interested, or questions that they're asking. So smaller groups, because young adults tend to do better in a group of 3 to 5 than 10 to 12.
Okay.
That's just what our research and our experience has shown. And so you might have one guy who might be older, who grabs 3 other guys and goes through this curriculum together. That's what that's for.
Cool.
And that's another 1 year. And then probably the most robust curriculum that we have is called All In, appropriately. And it's a 2-year program or curriculum. I got to stop saying program. It's a 2-year curriculum.
We need a program swear jar.
I know. Right. Yes. That's a great point.
Yeah.
But it's a
2-year
curriculum that's, and so the 1 years are $200. The 2 year is $400. Okay. So they're the 2 years, without a doubt, the heaviest commitment. Obviously the heaviest price tag comes along with that as well, but that's where, oh my gosh, where we've seen incredible life change and deep lifelong relationships where are formed among men in that 2-year program. When you're in that 2-year curriculum, they really, you just spend that much time together. What happens is, and it's weekly for 2 years, and you might miss here or there, or you might take a break for a holiday, but it's pretty much every week for 2 years. Someone in the group experiences some life-altering, tragic experience.
Oh yeah,
always the case. Yeah. And that group is the 10 to 12 size group. So with that many guys, someone goes through something, and the other guys galvanize around them and support them. So.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so cool. And one of the things that I love is the idea, for Crucible having an experiential weekend. And then there are some groups to get in, and but having a place and having some curriculum, even for a mixed group, of men who are initiated, men who are not, I think it's, for me, probably required. I mean, in a lot of ways, it would be so helpful to have something like that. But I don't know how well I could show up in a group unless I had an unlocking experience. But then we don't want it to just have a weekend mountaintop experience, right? Like,
that's it.
Continue to live and continue to journey that.
Yeah, definitely. It could be a great follow-up for churches who have men they've sent on a Crucible weekend, to continue that connection with those guys in the church. And the other cool thing about the curriculum is it really does help to give them a vision beyond themselves. You just had this experience, but as you grow, how are you giving it away? What are the ways that you are living selflessly in service to others now? Maybe in your church, maybe in another ministry, maybe it's serving on a Crucible weekend. There are a lot of ways that you can live beyond yourself and live for God's kingdom purposes.
Yeah. And one of the things that I also love about that is an experience of the Crucible has, you come out of your weekend, and there are now some groups available. There's second level weekends to do. And then the Crucible has, I'm going to call it a 2-year program because they call it a 2-year program.
Oh yeah. Right.
And I went through that. And so it was the weekly meetings and the coaching calls. And what that can do is that can pull men out of their church. And that's not the intent is to like remove men from the church.
Right.
And then to continue to journey with the brothers that they already have and the fellowship they already have. And desperately need men to show up in the church like that. I love the CLC out there.
It could give
option.
What I see it is, it could give, if you've been through the Crucible and you're going back to your church, it would give you the opportunity to utilize that curriculum, the CLC curriculum, to be able to draw other men in, share put in practice the things that you've learned in the Crucible Project and being vulnerable and authentic with these other guys. And then I think provide a forum or platform to be able to invite guys to experience it themselves in the Crucible, you know?
Yeah. And like you say, it is the deep relationship that I think, that's the gold. Mining for relationship with myself and with the men around me. Yeah. And a big part of my unlocking was leadership. And so I can see that as part of that as and well.
I'll just say this one last thing is it's just that from CLC's perspective too, I just see the thought of a guy who's been through CLC, these different curriculum, to be able to go to something like the Crucible is just something. Crucible is so uniquely positioned in that way that it offers something I think that's in a sense different from CLC, where it gives them an opportunity to get away, to be focused and not be distracted, and experience something that I think can get you to that next phase of where God wants you, in a sense. Because there's I think there's just something huge, obviously experiencing myself, there's something huge to being able to get away and experience that, that then can unlock new growth and opportunities for you, moving forward. So I'm excited for guys in CLC to be exposed to the Crucible Project, because I think it could be something that guys who've been through CLC before would be primed to experience a Crucible Weekend.
Yeah. I do believe that weekend is for every man, and I do believe it needs to be at the right time, both in their life and everything else that's going on. I love the word you use, the unlocking. The stuff is there, the good stuff is there, it's locked up for a good reason. All right, we're wrapping up, and last thing, anything else you want or need to say to feel complete?
Yeah, it's been a great experience. Love being with you, Ray. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, love it. All right.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Also, don't forget to check out myjourney2.com for your free 2-week trial. That's myjourneyto.com. Thank you for listening.